Welcome to Eviliv3, the live media commentary of the show that answers the question, is God's children Satan's organization? Subscribe if you're new to the channel because today we are reviewing Son of Rosemary. That is right. Looking forward to talking about this. And I have to tell you, initial impressions, meh. So let me get into it. This was released September 1st, 1998 by Penguin Books, and of course it is by Ira Levin, the same gentleman who wrote Rosemary's Baby, it's singular, baby, one of my favorite horror novels of all time, but also one of my favorite horror films of all time. Rosemary's Baby is brilliant, beautiful. I've reviewed it and discussed it ad nauseum for years, so I won't get into it today, but that is, suffice it to say, I had read that and I loved the film. I wanted to read this. Well, that more specifically, right? Never read it, didn't know the story. I knew it existed, but I just hadn't got around to it. I figured since I read the sequel to The Exorcist, I might as well read the sequel to Rosemary's Baby too, right? What else are you going to do but read? Read, everyone. It's good for your health. All right, so the premise is that Rosemary Woodhouse wakes up from a coma and didn't realize that she was in a coma. So she wakes up in 1999, November 1999. This entire book is about the year 2000. I don't remember if you guys remember, or I don't know if you guys remember the year 2000, Y2K. People were losing their shit. They thought governments were going to collapse. They thought bank institutions were going to collapse. Like everything was just crazy. So everyone stayed up. And the whole time, my parents, they're religious people. And so I was telling them, look, just calm down. Everything's going to be fine. And all they're doing is stocking up on food and supplies and survival stuff and just going sort of crazy. They're basically preppers anyway. And so they were just sort of doubling down, and they were totally worried and scared and terrified, and their religion was telling them to be terrified. And the whole time I'm just talking to them like, look, it's going to be okay. Nothing's going to happen. And so when 2000 came around and nothing happened, rather than saying, ha, I told you so, I just smiled to myself and enjoyed the fact that I'm right. I'm always right. It's not true, but most of the time. And that's not true. All right, sometimes I'm right, and that is true. Okay, so I thought it was funny that this whole book was set up around that same premise. Like, the year 2000, something big has to happen. So anyway, Rosemary was put into a coma by the group of witches that had forced her through the rape of Satan raping her in order to have her son, Andy, and he would be the Antichrist. And so when he was about 7 years old, around like 1973, she was making secret plans to take him away from this cult so that they couldn't, in fact, force this satanic ideal onto him, and he wouldn't then, bring about the end of the world or whatever the hell Antichrist do. They found out that she was going to be taking him, and so they did a spell to put her in a coma. Well, the problem with these spells, apparently in this sort of universe that Ira Levin has created, is that once all of the coven that cast the spell dies, the spell drops. There's no one left to carry it forward. And so finally, because again, all of these Satanists were all old people, as soon as the last one died in 1999, November, that's when Rosemary woke up and her world completely went on its head. She had no idea where her son was. She knew she divorced her husband, but she didn't know where he was, like Guy Woodhouse. So she had already sort of gone back to her maiden name at this point, which was Riley. So she's Rosemary Eileen Riley. Her son, who is Andrew John Woodhouse, she always called him Andy. She just has memory of him being at 7 years old. And she is watching TV and talking to nurses, and everyone has these little pins on their chest saying, "I heart Andy." She has no idea what Andy they're talking about, but she immediately connects it with her son. Well, the fact is that her son is the Antichrist, and he was supposed to sort of unite everyone and then bring about the end of the world. And that's kind of what's already happened, is united everyone. So she ends up finding out that Andy is in fact her Andy, only now he's a grown-ass man, and that he's started a organization called GC, which stands for God's Children. And this is basically presenting itself as a peace-forward charitable organization that is worldwide. And Andy has gone to such great lengths as to sort of lower the global temperature amongst groups and nations across the world. And so everyone sees him literally as the second coming of Christ. I mean, he's even the same age as Christ was, which sort of doubles down that idea of the Antichrist movement that Roman and Minnie Castevet were trying to happen with his birth at that time of course, 1966. So she wakes up, realizes that her son is still out there and he is fulfilling his destiny as she understands it. So she reaches out to a news outlet who wants to talk to her because, again, she's been in a coma since 73. And those people who have been in comas that long don't tend to wake up, especially waking up with their full faculties. And she has. And so she wakes up, she does this TV news interview, and she reaches out to Andy publicly. Now, everyone knows and loves Andy in the world at this point. And so at this point, you're starting to think this is very The Omen 3, the final conflict, where you got Sam Neill, great actor, portraying Damien, the Antichrist, and he's got this global organization and stuff. So I'm getting really that type of vibe from it at this point. And then they meet. The son and mother finally unite. And yes, he is wealthy and he has an organization at his back and tons of people constantly supporting him because of this global organization. And he sits down with his mom and he's like, look, quite frankly, the goodness in you turned me against Satan. And so, yes, Roman and Minnie Castevet and the cult of witches wanted me to become the Antichrist and create this organization, God's Children, in order to manipulate and destroy mankind. But I turned away from Satan, and now I'm doing it for good, and I'm turning everything good. And at first, it's a little too good for Rosemary to actually believe. But the more she looks into it throughout the course of this novel, she actually believes it. And then things start happening a little bit. She finds herself emotionally connected to this guy named Joe Mafia, who is Andy's close friend, but also his driver, and he sort of is opening up this new sexual world for her because, quite frankly, she's been in a coma and she's divorced from her husband, so she is a woman. She needs to live. Everyone needs loving. So, they finally connect and stuff, and that's really great for them. Her son actually is finding himself physically attracted to her, and the truth is he's half devil. Like, he has the eyes that he can manifest, natural eyes and horns, or he can hide them just with his own innate powers as the Antichrist. And so when he's around his mom, they sort of slip out. His eyes come out and his horns come out and stuff. And he actually straight up makes out with her at one point. And she's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. No, we can't do that. That's not how this works. And he's like, I'm sorry, I couldn't control myself. And so he's clearly attracted to his own mother. He doesn't. It just goes to show that he's not quite human, boundaries for a normal human relationship do not exist for him. Not only because, of course, he's the Antichrist, but also because he's put on this huge pedestal in front of the entire world. And this is how the world treats fame. They can do whatever they want. There's no boundaries, right? And so he's just lived that life for so long that he doesn't really know any different. He hasn't seen his mom since he was 7. And so it's a very strange connection that he's trying, this intimacy of parent and child that he's trying to connect with. And then he's confusing that intimacy with sexual intimacy. And through the context of the story, I understand it, though it is pretty creepy. So anyway, she starts hanging out with the organization, seeing all the good that they're doing, and they find out that they're setting up this huge worldwide global event of everyone lighting candles at the same time on New Year's in order to herald in the year 2000 and celebrate peace and love and life and God's children, etc. And so she thinks this is a brilliant idea. Of course, her son, born the Antichrist, is now turning it on the head of Satan. And then bad things start to happen. She's approached by this young woman named Judy Karyat, and this is an Indian woman from India who came over and sort of made an impression on Andy, and they started having a relationship, but he doesn't have relationships for very long because he gets tired of women, and sort of moves on from woman to woman from time to time. She reaches out to Rosemary, desperate because she wants Andy, but she knows that he's cheating on her and she doesn't understand who it is or why he's cheating on her. And it turns out that she ends up being killed. And this is a huge turning point in the book because it starts to shed doubt in Rosemary's mind about whether or not her son was lying to her, but also whether or not witches in the coven are all gone, because the way that she was murdered, she had 30 pieces of silver from Tiffany's stabbed into her body, and her body was sort of mutilated and stuff. And so Rosemary, being the brilliant person she is, comes up with this connection that Judy Karyat, her name was Judith S. Karyat, Judas Iscariot, if you say it quickly, which was the name of the apostle that turned on Jesus Christ and turned him into the Romans for 30 pieces of silver. And so she realizes that Judith, or Judy, was going to expose something about Andy, and so someone killed her for it, naming her Judas. And so her real name ended up being Alice Rosenbaum. And so whatever organization it was that sent her, knew who Andy was and knew what he was up to. And she tried to tell Rosemary, but she got killed before she could come out and say it. And then she realizes that Andy's organization, God's Children, actually does still have like rituals, like satanic ritual garbed rituals. And aesthetically, who doesn't love a good ritual? I mean, they're fucking brilliant. As far as worshiping Satan for Rosemary, that's a bridge too far, especially when Andy already told her that he wasn't doing that anymore. And so eventually she confronts Andy and says, look, I need to know the truth. You're clearly lying. And he's like, all right, you know what? Here's the truth. Come upstairs, see the ritual, and you're going to see that it's nothing what you expect. As far as Andy is concerned, this ritual is just play acting. It's just like going to mass as a Catholic on Christmas and watching the big pomp and circumstance. It's a theater stage play, basically. And it's just a way for him to make those in his inner circle feel special and excited. I can connect with that idea. I think it's really kind of cool. And so she goes up there, she wears one of the robes, and she sees that it is in fact just a stage play. It's not like satanic rituals. They're not summoning Satan or anything like that. And so she starts to calm down a little bit, but then she realizes that Judith is still dead. People are still dying around him. She doesn't understand why. And she was playing Scrabble with Judith. And one of the sort of pivotal, important elements of Rosemary's Baby, as both the novel and the film, was the anagram of Roman Castevet, turning into Adrian Marcato, who was the leader, the main witch leader of a satanic coven. And she discovered that through the book that Hutch had given her as a present called All of Them Witches. It's sort of a witchcraft book. And so Rosemary's always been great with anagrams. So this anagram keeps popping up over and over in this novel. And the anagram is, I'm looking for it right now, sorry about that, roast mules. And so it's never answered in the book what roast mules is an anagram for, but it's something that's presented as most 5-year-old children would recognize. And so people online have come up with, well, it must be somersault or something like that. Another option, and children would understand somersault, but what somersault has to do with anything, it still hasn't been made clear, at least not obviously clear to the reader. And I finished the book, obviously. And then another option that people are sort of coming up with is maybe it's soulmaster, but usually anagrams are one word that's mixed into multiple or just mixed into one weird word. And so soulmaster doesn't seem to be quite apropos, but then soulmaster would make sense for maybe the Antichrist, but definitely for Satan. And so who knows? But then children wouldn't know soulmaster. They would know the devil, though. So what are you going to do? It's unanswered. It's a mystery out there, but having it in this book definitely, aside from just the characters, connects it with the way Ira Levin writes for Rosemary. And I like that aspect of it. And it does allude that she knows what it means, I believe, at the very end. Anyway, it turns out that Andy did not know about the group continuing to be, or did not claim to know about the group that surrounded him, the inner circle of God's children, the organization. He didn't know that they were actually Satanists, but he did actually know in the very end. Hey, Chris, thanks for tuning in live. And the organization was, in fact, carrying out these murders without his involvement, but with his knowledge. And so he knew that she knew who he actually was. In his opinion, he was allowing her murder to go forward because he didn't want her to ruin his good works through this organization. About this lighting, global wide lighting ritual event that he was going to inspire through his charitable organization. He wanted that to happen so badly that he was willing to, turn the other cheek when it came to other people being murdered around him. That's too much for Rosemary to deal with, however. And so ultimately, when the night comes, and this is a huge spoiler, so if you don't want to know the end of this novel, this is the point where you need to check out of this review. 3, 2, 1, here we go. So Rosemary mentally hears her son calling out to him. Now he has these magical powers because he's the fucking Antichrist. And so she goes to him and finds out that he's been crucified in his apartment. Now he's not dead yet. He was just crucified, which means basically your hands and arguably your feet are nailed to some other structure in that cross pose. So she lets him out, and then the man that she's been with the whole time, her son's best friend and driver, Joe Mafia, comes into the room dressed as this elegant sort of Paradise Lost version of the devil, the romantic, misunderstood devil. And he comes in speaking as if he were the devil, and she suddenly realized, holy shit, he is Satan. Andy knew he was Satan the whole time, but he was not telling Rosemary about it because, one, he didn't want to freak her out, but also because he was actively working against his father. And it turns out that he was, in fact, working against his father, and Satan was pretty pissed off about it, too. And so he realized he didn't need Andy anymore because Andy had already set up the ritual. He needed Rosemary now. And ultimately, it ends up being that the ceremony, lighting all of these candles, was going to release a plague that the devil had planned and implemented chemicals into these candles that were all sold globally. And that would then wipe out mankind. And it was going to actually happen. And so the devil, at the very end of this novel, the devil is just courting in this one scene with Andy now down from the cross and almost dead. Rosemary trying to, reconcile what is actually happening, the fact that she was sleeping with the devil this whole time and didn't even know it, and he's been just messing with her. Of course, who's better to do that than the devil? And he's promising her eternal youth. If you just come with me, you choose what age you want to live in or live as, and I will make sure that you live that way for the rest of eternity. I have that power. I'm the devil after all. And he's, doing exactly what the devil does. And she's almost buying into it, but at the very end she refuses, and the devil ends up murdering her. And then she wakes up. And she's back in 1966, the morning after she was raped by the devil. And in Rosemary's Baby, the novel. And she wakes up and she sees her husband after he supposedly had his way with her. And, they were sort of talking. She's like, I had the strangest dream. And she was like trying to explain the dream to him. He's like, that's really amazing. That's fantastic. That's crazy. And then Hutch calls, and Hutch in the novel would then die shortly thereafter. And he says, hey, I've got this new apartment at the Dakota apartment complex, which was the model for the Bramford hotel that they're living in right now. You want me to try to get a room for you? And they're like, yeah, hell yeah, that's amazing. I would love to have that. And then it turns out that Hutch alludes to the, where is it on my notes? The Dakota and then roast mules. He refers to the anagram and the idea of lighting candles. And so that immediately connects Rosemary with the dream, and she starts to think, oh shit, is this actually going to be happening in the future? Or am I dead and all of everything that I thought experienced actually did experience? I did actually experience. And then the novel ends, forcing you to then make the decision as the reader. Either Rosemary dreamt the last half of Rosemary's Baby novel and all of this novel, or Satan did in fact kill her and she's in purgatory right now. And in either case, it's unsatisfying. You're following up Rosemary's Baby, a novel and film which are groundbreaking, literally scared the shit out of people. People fainted in the theater at the end of that film. The novel was banned in countries. The film was banned in countries. It was a huge event. And not only that, is it carries through. There's a legacy of Rosemary's Baby that is just brilliant as far as cinematography, as far as filmmaking, as far as storytelling. It's just a heralded piece of American cinema and literature. And you're going to follow that up with a novel that then reneges on all of that? That sort of makes a mockery out of all of it by making it so sort of up in the air and curious and questioning and everything. Like, the strength of Rosemary's Baby as a story was that the Satanists, who she was running away from the whole time, ended up loving and caring for the baby and wanting to support it and take care of her as well. That was the huge shocking ending, that the Satanists were not evil, that they actually wanted to love this baby, not murder it. And that blew people's minds. And in this novel, there's no catharsis. There's no subverting expectations. There's just a dream sequence? Get the fuck out of here. Like, it's not going to ruin Rosemary's Baby for me because I have loved it for years. And I've known it for years, decades. As far as new readers, if they read Rosemary's Baby or see the film and then read this, then they're not going to have that same connection. And again, Rosemary's Baby was written back in the 60s. This was written in 89 or 98. And so the only people it would really affect are modern readers. And the problem is they'll never understand the impact of the first novel if they continue to read this novel. And I'm not someone that believes in banning books or, telling people that they shouldn't read any particular piece of literature or anything. But it's disappointing. And that's really what it comes down to. I am wildly disappointed by the fact that it's all a dream. Like, you took the strength of the first novel and you made it a dream sequence. That sucks on every level. So a lot of people believe that she's in purgatory and that, yes, all of that stuff still happened. And then a lot of people believe that, no, that was in fact a dream sequence and that none of it happened, but it could be happening in the future. I personally believe that all of it did happen. That dream sequence was her waking up in purgatory or in one of Satan's little corners of hell, so that he didn't want to destroy Rosemary because that was the mother of his child. And so instead, he just forced her into sort of a dream loop that she has to exist in for all of eternity in some corner of hell in order to protect her just out of pure love or maybe just debt. He feels like he owes her because she gave him a baby. That's the way I like to see it. And there's a couple things that sort of hold up to that concept. First and foremost is the fact that when Hutch tells Rosemary Baby about the Hotel Dakota and how Yoko Ono and John Lennon stayed there or are looking to get an apartment or just purchased an apartment there, well, that was before that actually happens in real life. He was talking to her in 1973, and they actually only moved in they purchased it in 1973, while Hutch tells Rosemary about it all in 1965. So he's telling her about it a decade almost before they actually did it, which means Rosemary, who was in a coma, would never have known about that if, in fact, she had lived or if she had just dreamt about it all. She only would have known about that if she lived through it. And then he brought up the idea of strawberry fields in Lennon's Memorial Garden in Central Park, and she didn't understand the reference to imagine. course, that's a John Lennon song. Now, John Lennon was actually shot outside of the Dakota as well, which was, in fact, the model for the Bramford Hotel in the film and novel. So she didn't know that connection, which means she didn't live through all of that era. She was in a coma, which means she did not, in fact, dream all of that. And so there's little hints that Ira Levin is throwing in there saying, look, for all of you who want to believe that possibility that it was, in fact, all a dream, well, here's my little breadcrumbs, like Hansel and Gretel going through the forest, telling you that no, she, in fact, did experience all of that. She was in a coma, and that's why she doesn't understand those references when they are later told to her in that sort of purgatory zone that she ends up finding herself in. That makes it better for me, because that tells me that Satan didn't want to destroy her. He wanted to protect her in some way. And that everything that did in fact happen in Rosemary's Baby, the novel, and now in Son of Rosemary, the novel, did in fact happen. It doesn't take away the impact, and it doesn't leave me satisfied, but at least it doesn't ruin a brilliant novel for me. And so I just have to, I have to just sort of take this at face value. Ira Levin made a choice. He knew what he was doing when he wrote Rosemary's Baby, and he knew what he was doing when he wrote Son of Rosemary. I can appreciate the storytelling. I can appreciate the slow unfolding of the mystery. But I have to tell you, that only happens in the very final third of this novel. The first 2/3 of this novel are all about Rosemary awakening and sort of discovering the world around her. Yes, you need that. But what was great about the first novel, Rosemary's Baby, was that it was a thriller. It was a mystery. It was full of her questioning the whole time. And this one is her accepting everything, even stuff that seems like she shouldn't be accepting. Like her son, the Antichrist, has forsook Satan and created a Christian organization called God's Children. All of that did happen, but it's strange that she just accepts it wholeheartedly. She should at least question it, right? Like more than they actually did in the novel. At least in my opinion, she should have. All that being said, I ended up giving Son of Rosemary 2 out of 5 evil eyes. It was an unsatisfying sequel and conclusion to Rosemary's Baby. There's really no story left to tell. Humanity died, Satan made the Armageddon happen, and the world ended. So, fun? I don't know. Is that great? I don't know. It's a little anticlimactic in my opinion. I like that the devil, I'd cheer for bad guys. I like that the devil won in the end, but I don't like that Rosemary is sort of left wondering what the fuck happened. She was our window into this universe that Ira Levin painted. She was our window into understanding sort of how everything worked. And for her to be left unknowing in the dark, that's unsatisfying to me. I don't like it at all. So that being said, the first 2/3 of this novel are not that great, though the first third where she wakes up and reunites with Andy was pretty cool. So really it's just the second part of the second third of this novel that I found unsatisfying. The final third of the novel was unsatisfying because it was sort of left in the air for interpretation. And I don't need everything handed out to me like A plus B equals C. But sometimes, especially when it comes to a follow-up to Rosemary's Baby, which was very much and here is the final result that you will not like, but it is here. Maybe that's why he did it in this one. It would make sense, except that it's scorning everyone that ended up loving the first novel. And he completed it that same exact way. So what are you going to do? Well, I'll tell you what you can do, and that's read this if you want to. And if you don't, I totally understand it. So that is my review for Son of Rosemary, the sequel to Rosemary's Baby by Ira Levin. Check it out if you want to spend some... It's a very quick read, so it's not going to be a huge investment of your time and energy. And if you did love Rosemary's Baby and you were wondering what happened, well, now you can find out. Of course, this was written a long time ago, so you probably already read it if you wanted to by now. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this. Ira Levin is still a great author. Rosemary's Baby is a brilliant novel. And of course, the movie was made is almost beat for beat exactly. There's like 2 scenes that were not in the film that were in the novel. And it is a brilliant film. If you haven't seen it or you haven't seen it in a while, do yourself a favor and check those out for sure. So, as always, remember that evil spelled backwards is live, so get your asses out there and be evil.